do it to yourself, you do. That's why you do it to yourself, just you.
Brendan Lacey, Campaigns Communications Vice President, and I'm 23 years of age now.
What do you feel were your biggest accomplishments during this year?
I'm happy that, first of all, obviously the march was a huge success in that we got a huge amount of students on the streets from UCD, showing that students in UCD still care about the Stop Fees campaign. I'm really happy with the result of the constitutional referendum. That's something that I actually started 2 years ago when I was a sports officer. It was myself and Paul Lynham put in the motion that it was time to review the constitution and that things needed to change in the union. I'm delighted to have been part of the process of that.
Okay, what do you feel were your biggest failings during the year?
Failings. No one likes to talk about their failing, but I suppose I could have done more in terms of lecture addressing, in terms of kind of getting the face out there and having people know me. I took a choice of, you have a limited amount of time, I suppose, in the office, so there's one of two ways I think that sabbatical officers can be. They can be more in the office and working as part of the team to try and help everybody with their projects and get things done, or you can be kind of more out there and getting the face out there and having the students know who you are. And maybe I'm not as well known, but I'm certainly happy with the work I did with the team.
Okay, now you talk about the constitution that you're very happy with and that you support, but this constitution is effectively eradicating the role that you now currently have. So
Absolutely.
Why have you decided to support that? Do you not feel it's an important role?
I was one of the people that suggested that the role needed to go, because I think as the SU moves forward, I mean, having done the job for a year, and Pat will be in the same position, having done the job the year before me, and we were the two biggest voices for needing to change the way the campaigns communications role works. It's not really gone, it's just changed into 7 different jobs, if that makes sense. I think I'm a rarity in my own brief this year, because obviously the media officer left early in the year, and myself and Pat decided that I'd be able to double job and do the job of the media officer and the campaigns communications role, which, I mean, things like, the Facebook, the website, all those kind of things would normally have a lot of support. The constituency officer would normally have a lot of support from the media officer in doing that, and I had to do both. Probably didn't do either as well as I could have as a result, but I think the communications side of the job of the campaigns communications, it would definitely be done better by a professional, someone with huge experience in media, I'm sure any of the Observer could do probably the media and communication side of the job slightly better than myself, because you've experience in it, and you're not coming in fresh. And I think definitely a more professional approach to that side of things would be better. Do that.
With regards to the front page story of the last issue of the Observer, which was student residences being filmed by UCD personnel, without saying that falls purely under your auspices, it's also an issue for welfare and the president. But it certainly does fall under your jurisdiction.
Absolutely, yeah. It's something I've been talking about all year within these corridors anyway.
Well, okay, I have 2 questions for you. Firstly, you said just there, and was said before, that you learnt about this in the summer, although granted you were told it was a pilot scheme.
Well, we were told that it wasn't happening, so there wasn't much of a fight to fight when it wasn't happening.
Yeah, what has taken so long for this even to be made aware of, let alone fought?
Well, what do you mean? I don't understand you. It wasn't happening until a certain point.
Well, it did happen.
But it's happened now, and now we've made an issue of it. So
right. It did happen over the summer.
It happened once in the summer, and it was made an issue of then with the people that it needed to be made an issue with in the university, and we were given assurances that it would not happen, and that we would be informed if anything like that was ever going to happen. And then during the elections, it came up again, and we learned about it. I mean, we don't have eyes and ears everywhere. We can only learn of these things when we learn of them. And when we learned of it, we've taken action. So, and it's something I intend to continue. Actually, I really think cameras on res is a step way too far. It's an invasion of privacy that goes beyond any kind of allowable discourse or justifiable.
Firstly, do you have any plans for holding the people who, the management of res to account? That's something we'd have to work on as a sabbatical team. I can't speak, for Pat, who's the president, and he makes the decisions. But it's something I'm passionate about.
Would you personally call for the resignation of the head of residences?
Yeah. If it comes to it's 100% true that there's been cameras on res and that they intend to continue, yeah, 100%.
Bar the Fees March, which was organised and promoted nationally by USI, What campaigns were you actively involved in that were not primarily organised by other officers, e.g. welfare, sport, Irish, LGBT or environmental officers, but were instigated personally by you?
Well, I mean, my job, I said at the start of the year when I ran for election that my job wasn't to come up with the campaigns. It's not to come up with the issues, it's to come up with the campaigns. So I'm happy enough that I've been involved in a number of the campaigns across the board. So I don't think you can take all the campaigns away and say what campaigns were you involved in. You know, my job isn't to sit here and decide that there's an issue facing UCD students and then try and come up with a campaign for it. It's to see the issues as they are and try best to build a campaign and get people involved in them.
Or do you feel like you've been involved as you could have been in all those campaigns?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, if I had another year at the job, I'm sure I could do more. I'm sure it's a learning curve, so I'm never going to say I had a perfect year. No, and it wasn't anywhere close. I definitely could have done a lot more, but it's a learning curve, and I'd love a second year at it. Can we reopen the nominations? I don't think I get elected anyway. I think Paddy would beat me.
Have you done any of your promise campaigning in relation to the Hunt Report, National Strategy on Graduate Employment, or UCD cutting the pay of its staff members?
No, the staff members one I haven't, because it's something that we took on. Like, I mean, we spoke about it as a sabbatical team, and unfortunately the year that was in it, there were more pressing issues for the SU at home than trying to sort out everyone else's house and trying to sort out our own. With regards to national graduate employment, yeah, that's something that we've been working on with USI, and as well the postgraduate loan. That's something that we're working on currently. One of our mandates last year to Congress was to make sure that there was that USI worked with us to put forward a postgraduate loan scheme. It hasn't happened yet, and as we've seen with the cuts in the budget in December, it's now more prevalent and more necessary than ever. So that's something we're continuing to work on with USI. But it's not something that I can do just from this office. It's something that I have to work as part of a team nationally on, and I'm happy with how we're going with that. And myself and Pat have been working here just to try and come up with essentially alternatives just in case, just for UCD students. I mean, there is a similar kind of system in DCU. It's not a guaranteed loan scheme, but they do have a loan scheme of their own. They're non-affiliates of USI, so if they can do it, there's absolutely no reason we can't. So it's something we're working on, but hopefully the national loan scheme will come through. And with regards, what was the Hunt Report? I think the Hunt Report, I mean, what I meant by the implementation of the Hunt Report was things like Student Support Act, making sure that was rolled out, and that's going to come in September. So can't say I had a huge influence over it, but I'd certainly make sure, you know, nothing went wrong.
Well, you were originally openly against the introduction of a graduate tax. Do you still stand by that?
Personally, or in the job?
Well, I would hope that one and the same would be.
Sometimes they're different. I mean, my job is to follow policy and to follow mandate, and I can campaign heavily on that without anything. Personally, in terms of where my feelings lie in it now, they've changed slightly over the course of the year, just from having been so involved and learning so much. I mean, you learn so much when you get into the job about how things really work, and I suppose my personal view on it now would be that in light of all the cuts that we're facing across the country, the system that allows no cash barrier to education, so no upfront cash barrier to education, would be the ideal one. I don't think, obviously I'm still 100% in favour of free fees, to be perfectly honest. In an ideal world, that education should be a right, it's not a privilege. But we're not in an ideal world, and everyone's facing cuts, and so it would be unrealistic to expect that we wouldn't have to face similar cuts. And so my biggest priority leaving the job would be that there's no cash barrier, no upfront cash barrier. So at the moment it's a €2,250 cash barrier, which I think is quite prohibitive. I know I'm going to struggle to get back into college now. It's a toss-up, I suppose. I mean, I'd lean towards a graduate tax or towards a student loan scheme. It depends on the finer details of whichever one come out. I mean, a loan scheme, a graduate, like, you know, with a graduate, there's problems with all of them. There's a graduate tax, you know, when do you stop being taxed? You know, is there a cap on how much you have to pay back? Will it just be an extra tax for as long as you're earning? With a loan scheme, what's the interest going to be like? Do you start paying it back the minute you get the loan and start in college? Do you start paying it back when you finished and you started earning? You know, is the interest going to be prohibitive on it that you end up paying back your interest more than your loan forever? So it really depends on the finite details of the plan. At the moment, what we're saying is that these are bases of ideas. Maybe somewhere there'd be a hybrid in between a graduate tax and a loan scheme.
Hold on, you're the communications officer, and if you don't have enough information to be able to make an educated decision on what you would vote in the preferendum, how can you expect the electorate that you're supposed to be educating in this to make an informed decision?
I think that's unfair. I wouldn't say that I don't have enough information. I don't think anyone in the country has enough information on that. I think what we have is the basis of these ideas, And I think what we need to be saying now is more, not that we have to have a definite plan now, but that we have to have the framework. And I think students, I think you give them too little credit there. I think they have the intelligence to work out for themselves which framework they prefer. And obviously we'll be informing them anyway. But
there have been complaints made at SU Council about reports being sent out late, they're put on the website late or not at all.
Yeah.
Poor communication regarding where council is taking place. Why have you had so much difficulty performing what are perceived as relatively simple tasks?
yeah, I have to hold my hands up and say that was an area I fell down in, I suppose. Why did I? As I said before, I don't know. I won't make excuses for it. Like, I mean, it would have been nice to have the support of a media officer like all the CNC officers before me have had. In terms of, you know, I don't think Pat was regularly updating the website with the reports. I say that was probably our media officer last year. But why? Because it is a menial task. It's an easy one, but at the same time, well, we've had problems with the website all year anyway. But when it comes to things like putting the reports, unfortunately, you know, you get into a meeting and then you have ties into another meeting and then you go from that meeting and you've got something to do from those meetings, and then it ends up 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night and the mind slips. So it's something I should have been better at. I wasn't the only one when it came to the sending out of reports, but in terms of putting up the reports, no, I should have been a lot better with that. I can't really justify that.
If you had to give yourself a rating out of 10 for how well you've done this year, what would you give yourself?
6.
6?
Maybe 7. 6.5. 6.
6? Can you elaborate?
I achieved, I mean, you've gone through all the things I didn't achieve in my manifesto there, but I did achieve a huge amount of the things that are in my manifesto, pretty much all of them bar the 3 or 4 things that you mentioned.
Do you feel like throughout the year you've worked as hard as you possibly could for the office?
I think there's definitely been times when I've worked to my absolute, I've broken my heart, you know. I mean, I can't remember 1 or 2, you know, it's rare that there's times you leave the office before 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and there's been days where, no, it hasn't really come off for me. I've had bad days, but I've had good days. But you know, I'm pretty sure the good days outweigh the bad days. But you know, I'm one of those people that's my biggest critic, my own biggest critic. So I'll always think that I could work harder. It's up to other people to say if they thought I worked hard enough. They pay me, no, I don't pay myself.
You do it to yourself, you do. That's why it hurts. You do it to yourself, just you.
Right, thanks very much.
Yes. Didn't ask me any of the nice things I did.
What do you?
No positives in there.